Royce Gracie, UFC 1 on November 12, 1993 in Denver, Colorado, is where Royce Gracie casually rewrites the laws of fighting while wearing pajamas. The 176-pound Brazilian submits three men in one night, each heavier, meaner, and more confused than the last. He taps Ken Shamrock in just 57 seconds, proving its strength means nothing when your opponent is basically human Velcro. In the final, he chokes out Gerard Gordeau to win the $50,000 purse, looking more like a sleepy yoga instructor than a cage fighter. There are no gloves, no time limits, and no clue what's happening. Referees improvise rules mid-fight, and viewers realize they might be witnessing a felony broadcast live on pay-per-view. Gracie's calm jiu-jitsu dismantling of chaos makes submission violence a household term and forces every heavyweight in America to suddenly get into grappling. His domination sparks a martial arts revolution that carries directly into the next evolution of mixed combat, where everyone scrambles to learn how to survive on the ground. Tank Abbott, UFC 6 on July 14, 1995, introduces David Tank Abbott, a 280-pound bar-brawling experiment in what happens when your uncle who lifts kegs decides to join a cage fight. He knocks out John Matua so violently that Matua's body seizes on the mat, while Tank casually celebrates like he just opened another beer. Minutes later, he slams Cal Worsham into the fence unconscious, proving that his fighting style is equal parts chaos and physics demonstration. Abbott fights bare-knuckled, wears cut-off shorts, and proudly claims he's in it for the bar tab, which might be the most honest contract in UFC history. The Nevada Commission fines him for taunting fallen opponents, mostly because there wasn't yet a rule against being too mean. He also once said jiu-jitsu was just fancy hugging, which aged about as well as his liver. Tank becomes the poster boy for early-era savagery, pure brawl, zero technique, and a necessary villain in MMA's path toward actual martial art. Don Frye. In 1996, Don Frye, part firefighter, part mustache, part pain enthusiast, storms through the Ultimate tournament and wins the whole thing like it's a weekend hobby. Within 12 months, he stacks 8 wins, including an 8-second knockout of Thomas Ramirez that ends so fast commentators are still saying, "And we're live," as Ramirez hits the mat. Frye fights like he's allergic to backing up, swinging until someone falls, and it's rarely him. But nothing defines him more than Pride 21 in 2002, when he meets Yoshihiro Takayama, and both men decide blocking is for cowards. They grab each other by the neck and exchange over 200 punches, each without moving their feet, looking like two dads fighting over the last beer at a barbecue. The ref just stands there, probably praying one of them remembers to blink, until both faces resemble uncooked steaks. Even Japanese commentators laugh mid-shock, realizing they're witnessing mutual attempted homicide in slow motion. Takayama's jaw is barely hanging on, and everyone agrees they've just watched the most gloriously stupid display of toughness in MMA history. Mark Coleman. In 1996, Mark Coleman, a former Ohio State wrestler built like a refrigerator with anger management issues, wins back-to-back tournaments at UFC 10 and 11, proving cardio is optional if you hit people hard enough. He coins the term ground and pound after smothering Gary Goodridge into the canvas and landing so many headbutts that fans start counting them like free throws. The fight gets so messy that even 1990s referees, whose job descriptions were basically survive, start calling for reform. Coleman treats opponents like heavy bags with pulses, turning wrestling control into blunt force trauma. Months later, he beats Igor Vovchanchin, a man who'd never lost, by literally exhausting him into quitting mid-fight because apparently cardio is contagious. Commentators compare the scene to a bear sitting on a washing machine, which feels generous to the machine. Coleman becomes the prototype of the modern heavyweight: wrestle first, smash second, breathe later, and sets the blueprint every big guy still tries to copy. Gary Goodridge. At Pride 1 in October 1997 inside the Tokyo Dome, Gary Goodridge, former arm wrestling champion turned part-time executioner, shows up like violence owes him money. By then, his legend was already carved in elbows from UFC 8, where he crucified poor Paul Herrera and turned ground and pound into ground and funeral. Downward elbows were already banned by this point, mostly for safety, partly because no one wanted Goodridge proving skulls have expiration dates. Even Big Daddy later admitted some of those fights gave him nightmares, which tells you everything you need to know about how loosely Pride defined regulation. His career became the cautionary tale that forced MMA to start separating competition from crime scene. Wanderlei Silva. Between 2001 and 2005, Wanderlei Silva turns Pride's middleweight division into a live-action horror series. Fighting out of Curitiba, Brazil, he mauls Kazushi Sakuraba so many times the Japanese crowd starts cheering for mercy instead of victory. His style is pure chaos: knees, stomps, and soccer kicks delivered with the same enthusiasm most people reserve for karaoke. In the 2004 Pride Middleweight Grand Prix, he knees Rampage Jackson through the ropes in a finish so violent it looks like a special effect. Fans nickname him the Axe Murderer, which is somehow less terrifying than watching him shadowbox. Even Wanderlei admits later he doesn't remember half his fights, probably because he was too busy trying to erase other people's memories. His reign represents the peak of aggression over safety MMA, an era so wild that when soccer kicks finally get banned, everyone suddenly remembers what concussions are, setting the stage for the sport's eventual civilizing under unified rules. Mauricio Rua. At Pride Total Elimination 2005, a 23-year-old Mauricio Shogun Rua enters the ring looking like a nice kid from Curitiba who just happens to destroy professional fighters for rent money. He meets Rampage Jackson in the opening round and immediately starts throwing knees like he's trying to invent a new crime. Within minutes, Rampage's ribs sound like bubble wrap, and his corner literally throws in the towel mid-round to stop the chaos. Shogun doesn't celebrate. He just jogs back to the corner like this was cardio day. Across the entire Grand Prix, he blends savage striking with calm precision, knocking out legends like Alistair Overeem and Ricardo Arona, all while smiling through blood. Even Pride's commentators stop pretending this is sport and start calling it Shogun's show. His run becomes the gold standard of shootbox violence. Beautiful, reckless, and still looped in highlight reels anytime someone asks what peak Pride looked like. Fedor Emelianenko. At Pride 25 and 26 in the early 2000s, Fedor Emelianenko proves that being terrifying doesn't require facial expressions. The 230-pound Russian calmly walks into the ring, mauls Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira for 10 straight minutes, and looks like he's thinking about groceries the entire time. He lands over 200 unanswered strikes while Nogueira, a world-class grappler, just tries to remember what year it is. The referee nearly steps in multiple times, but Fedor never actually stops. He just resets his posture like he's assembling IKEA furniture. Nogueira refuses to tap, which is brave but also kind of unnecessary at that point. Even the commentators start laughing nervously, unsure if Fedor's heart rate ever cracks 70. He wins by unanimous decision through sheer control and complete emotional indifference, earning Russia its quiet destroyer. Mirko Cro Cop. Between 2002 and 2007, Mirko Cro Cop Filipovic turns the head kick into both an art form and a public safety hazard. The Croatian southpaw, a former anti-terror cop, sums up his entire strategy in one line: right leg hospital, left leg cemetery. It's not a threat, it's a business plan. In Pride, he decapitates Igor Vovchanchin with a left high kick so clean, the replay might as well come with a trigger warning. A few years later, he finishes Wanderlei Silva with the exact same weapon, proving consistency really is the key to success. Then Karma shows up wearing Gabriel Gonzaga's shorts, and Cro Cop gets folded by an ironic head kick that sends him straight into meme history. Even Cro Cop later laughs, saying, "That's MMA. Sometimes you're the highlight, sometimes you're the poster." His career becomes the perfect example of violent poetry in motion, beautiful to watch, painful to experience, and impossible to forget. BJ Penn. At UFC 80 on January 19, 2008, BJ Penn turns the octagon into a live horror film with Joe Stevenson as the unwilling co-star. Within seconds, Penn slices Stevenson's forehead open with a clean uppercut, and blood pours so fast that the canvas starts to resemble a crime scene. Stevenson fights on, blinking through a red curtain, probably wondering if this counts as drowning. Penn stays calm, like he's painting, not punching, and eventually locks in a rear naked choke that ends the suffering with surgical precision. The post-fight photo is so graphic, the UFC reportedly shelves it from promo use, which says a lot for a sport built on violence. Even Joe Rogan admits on air, "I've never seen so much blood come from one guy who's still conscious." Stevenson ends the night in the hospital, and Penn walks out with a lightweight belt and a new nickname in the making. The man who proved precision can be far scarier than power. Brock Lesnar. UFC 100 on July 11, 2009, becomes a $1.3 million pay-per-view masterclass in control chaos as Brock Lesnar, former WWE champion, NCAA wrestler, and part-time farm tank, mauls Frank Mir in their rematch. Lesnar's 265-pound frame pins Mir to the mat like a toddler holding down a balloon, and the hammer fists that follow make the crowd forget the sport has rules. Herb Dean lets it go a few extra seconds, probably out of pure disbelief that someone this size can move that fast. When it's finally over, Lesnar screams in Mir's face, gets booed, and doubles down by yelling, "I'm gonna drink a Coors Light," specifically because the UFC was sponsored by Bud Light. Critics call it unsportsmanlike. Lesnar calls it Tuesday. His raw, almost cartoonish power turns him from scripted wrestling villain to legitimate UFC monster, proof that when brute strength meets minimal restraint, pay-per-view history is made. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.